Health insurance CEOs are getting real nervous after their boy Brian Thompson got smoked. Healthcare insurance companies are now removing the names and the bios of the healthcare executives and CEOs on their website. Bruh, these health insurance CEOs are so terrified. They're even trying to get their Wikipedia pages removed. After Brian Thompson got smoked, the ruling class is in full-fledged panic mode. And this is great news because healthcare CEOs got way too comfortable walking among us, pretending they was welcome. They needed to be humbled. And these motherfuckers were absolutely humbled, as we recently had Blue Cross Blue Shield, who announced that they are reversing their decision to put a cap on anesthesia coverage. Now do you guys see why it's great for the ruling class to have a very healthy fear of the working class? Brian Thompson being killed in such a great moment because now our country is taking this time to reflect on the scam that is private healthcare. We are witnessing a moment of mass awareness due to the actions of one based individual. I cannot stress enough how evil these healthcare CEOs are. They make their profit directly from Americans being denied healthcare, dying, and going medically bankrupt. Health insurance and war are the two worst industries to make your fortune in. And if you did, you deserve to face massive social pressure.
It's left to see how much control a person like Giuliani, who has been sitting in Italy for years, making himself rich with UN humanitarian aid, reselling a UN-delivered humanitarian aid. How much control does he have over these former Al-Qaeda and ISIS factions? How much can he, keep them at bay, I guess, into this whole, we will rebuild a new Syrian nation for all? I have many doubts. I have many doubts. Just as the offensive got started a few days ago, the members of the HTS were already killing each other with members of the Syrian National Army. There were already casualties among their own ranks just because of old grudges resurfacing. So I think what's next for Syria, it's a very, very dark chapter, and not just for Syria, for the entire region. What happened today is going to have repercussions for the entirety of West Asia and honestly for the rest of the world.
What's poppin', my friends, my family? Welcome to another week of RBN Live. This is one. It's gonna be hard to talk about this topic, man. It's very sad what's going on in Syria right now, and it's very shocking to me to see people who consider themselves pro-Palestine celebrating alongside Benjamin Netanyahu. We have witnessed, I don't know if I'm being too dramatic, but the fall of the Middle East, the greater Israel project being expanded. We are witnessing the finale of the terrorists winning the war on terror. The terrorists, you can always make the argument that they won over the last few years, but it is definitive now that terrorists 100% won the war on terror. The same groups that was demonized, that were put on terrorist lists in the UK and the United States, are now being legitimized, being celebrated in the corporate media. The UK now floating the idea of removing the terrorist groups in Syria off their terrorist list. So the terrorists have won. Benjamin Netanyahu arguably won. I wouldn't say that yet. And I'm going to ask my guest and wonder if he agrees with me. Because I still believe that Israel is in a tough position, but the fall of Assad in Syria, the ending of the supply lines to Hezbollah, I think this will buy Israel much more time. And it's very unfortunate to say that. But I want to see if my guest agrees or disagrees with me. I'm very interested in getting the perspective of a critically acclaimed international journalist and great friend of RBN. Thank you for joining us today, Dan Cohen. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I was showing the video. I don't have the nerve. I don't have the stomach to play it. But Benjamin Netanyahu, he was doing a victory dance after the fall of Assad, which is why I don't understand if you're pro-Palestine, that doesn't immediately trigger some alarm bells. But Dan Cohen, feel free to agree or disagree with me. Do you agree with my initial assessments? How does this impact Israel and the current status of the Middle East and the resistance? Just to get started, thank you for joining us once again, Dan Cohen.
Yeah, good to be with you, Nick. Thanks a lot for having me. I mean, there is so much to be seen in the coming days, weeks, months of how this will unfold and impact everything going on. But I mean, first of all, I think we have to be clear that what we have just witnessed in the past few days with the sudden collapse of the Syrian government is the loss of sovereignty for Syria. And I think that's the number one issue, at least inside Syria's borders. So, whatever people think of Bashar al-Assad, and there are a lot of criticisms of him, for me, and I think as an American, my criticisms, my issue is less with how he governed, how he ruled, what he did or did not do, and really how the American government, in cahoots with the UK government, Turkey, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, waged a 14-year dirty war on Syria, where they paid Takfiri mercenaries to terrorize the country. And it was a hybrid war in which they have the most crushing sanctions possible. They reduced Syria, which used to be one of the safest countries in the Middle East and probably the world in 2010, to a total post-apocalyptic kind of hellscape, and where people were starving, where the United States is occupying an entire third of the country, which includes the oil-rich regions and the breadbasket. And we had, Dana Stroul, who at the time was a Pentagon official, saying that the whole idea is basically to starve Syria, to use wheat as a weapon. So all of whatever decision Assad made in terms of his willingness to resist, to send forces, there's a lot of questions about that, and all that is fair to debate and criticize. And how exactly the Syrian government collapsed, the military collapsed, is a big question. But the first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that the reason for this is because of the U.S. government. It's the decisions made here in Washington, D.C. to starve Syrians, to send al-Qaeda mercenaries to terrorize the country. So that's first. I mean, I agree with you that it's totally shocking to see people who are ostensibly pro-Palestine, or whatever you want to call it, or against Israel, who are celebrating this loss of sovereignty, because this is not, if it were some kind of popular uprising in Syria where a whole bunch of Syrian people, the majority of the Syrian people, decided, you know what, we're going to get rid of this guy because we don't like him, then that's perfectly fine. Then, so be it. But what we saw is Turkish-backed jihadists and Israeli-backed mercenaries. Israel's been funding, training, and arming, giving medical care to these mercenaries for several years. These are the people who overthrew the government. And what I suspect the reason that we saw the Syrian military collapse in such a sort of dramatic and quick way after Aleppo and Hama, there were no more shots fired. It was after some initial battles, then it was just over. You have to wonder what was going on in the ranks of the Syrian military. Had it been infiltrated, bribed, pressured, all kinds of things by these same foreign powers? So this is just a major attack on Syria's sovereignty, and we see the collapse of the axis of resistance. Now, Syria served as a land bridge between from Iraq to Iran. From Iran to Iraq, Syria to Lebanon. So, which basically put it on the border of Palestine. Of course, Syria has a border with Palestine too, in Israeli occupied Golan Heights. But Hezbollah would not have been able to do what it did if it were not for Syria, and take some pressure off of the Gaza Strip, that's undergoing the most heinous genocide, certainly of our lifetimes. So it's a sad, tough day, and we're seeing this fanatic al-Jilani, the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria, being lionized and treated as he's going this like moderate makeover by the U.S. media, and as you
He's
said,
woke
the
Al-Qaeda.
UK government. What's that?
He's woke Al-Qaeda. That's what everyone calling him now.
Yeah, exactly. Woke, yeah, exactly. So he's suddenly, being like lionized as some kind of hero, and the same thing they did with like Zelensky, and he's making himself. I mean, actually, I was just looking at my old tweets. This has been something that's been going on for years. If you look at, I'll see if I can dig up the tweet, but I had these tweets from Charles Lister, who's basically an Al Qaeda lobbyist, saying that he's a Che Guevara type figure. So this has
You
been.
see his interview on CNN? The second I saw his interview on CNN, I knew he was Western coached. He was giving everything that they wanted. He was saying everything he wanted to hear, but go ahead. But it's so obvious that he got some sort of PR training from the West. But continue your thoughts, Dan.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's obvious that like some, K Street PR firm was, making Al-Qaeda into some, friendly branch. And I mean, it's interesting because there's a video that just came out from Elijah Magnier, the Italian correspondent who's in Lebanon, where he showed Shia Muslims praying at this important shrine in Damascus. And apparently this new regime is allowing them to pray, which of course is a good sign, because Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which Jilani was an ISIS lieutenant, one of al-Baghdadi's top lieutenants before he split off and swore allegiance to Ayman al-Zawahiri of Al-Qaeda. That ideology is all about exterminating minorities, religious minorities, imposing their strict Wahhabi interpretation of Islamic law. And now there's this video where they're allowing Shia Muslims to pray at a shrine in Damascus, which is, of course, good. I wonder, I can't help but think that now that all eyes are on Syria, this is kind of a PR move that's being coached, as every other one of his moves are too, to basically make this look like a much more, to make it look palatable to the West.
If so many of the diaspora was so confident that Syria now is ruled by woke Al-Qaeda that is now reformed, why won't they move back home? And there's another point you mentioned as well, because we can get that's more of a funny point more than anything else. But there's something else that you discussed, and I would actually love, and if you're listening to me, you disagree with me on this. If you follow me, you disagree with me on this. I would actually love to have a civil discussion. You guys know I love civil debates with someone who's cheering the fall of Assad. I've researched, I've been reporting on Syria for years. Maybe there's something I'm missing, and I will 100% acknowledge that I may be missing a piece of the puzzle here. But you just explain how the resistance, and everyone who follows geopolitics, been explaining how the resistance has been destroyed by this. The resistance is in shambles. And I need to understand, what is the criticism of Assad that is worth that? Because I explained on this channel that Assad is very standard for Middle Eastern leaders. Now, considering he's been fighting a civil war with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, once again, I'm not saying I will wage it the same way, but the way he waged the war has been very standard by government standards. You have the United States, and this is a story I shared a while ago. I can show you guys the link, where there were prisoners, black prisoners, who was lighting themselves on fire in the United States because prison conditions were so bad. You have letters written by prisoners in Florida begging people to free them because they have horrific conditions, suffering from disease, malnutrition, beating by the prison guards. And then the same country want to turn around and said Assad has horrible prison conditions. Get the fuck out of here. You guys understand, the United States is the prison state capital of the world. And Assad has nothing on the United States. The United States send drunk rednecks to prison for 20 years for January 6th. What do you think our government would do if we sided with the Chinese and Russia, who secretly armed us to overthrow our government using violence and torture? What the fuck would the United States do to us? The same thing at a minimum that Assad did. So once again, I would love, and Dan, feel free to disagree or agree with me, or I would love to hear your thoughts. But I would love to hear, like, as extremely anti-Assadist, if I am wrong on this issue. I am 100% open to being wrong, but I do not understand, and I do not see the trade-off for destroying the resistance and giving Benjamin Netanyahu a win because of Assad derangement syndrome. How else do you treat ISIS and terrorist fighters who betrayed your country? And I read the articles, and I may do a solo stream when I have more time. I was like, I want to see what the West is accusing them of. The only thing they have is the false gas attacks that's been debunked. Everything else, they say, oh, Assad, he unjustly imprisoned folks. You mean like the UK, who's silent free speech and locking people up because they stand against genocide? What are we talking about? But sorry for the rant, Dan. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I think you're right. It's if you look at Syria in a vacuum, then you can find all kinds of things to criticize. People in prison who may have unjustly been held in prison. I don't deny that very well may have happened. There are videos I've seen from Sednaya prison being emptied that are definitely horrifying. But as you just pointed out, like the West, the US, the UK, Turkey are suddenly, the arbiters of justice here. It's completely laughable. Especially when you consider what's going on in Sdei Taiman prison in Israel, which they all support. They all support the mass rape of Palestinian prisoners, the murder of Palestinian hostages who have never done anything wrong, who are just simply detained by the Israeli military in Gaza and taken in there where they've been starved, where they've been tortured, where they've been beaten, where they've been raped by dogs, where they've had their limbs amputated, where they've been murdered. And it's just, whatever Assad did, whatever the former Syrian government did, pales in comparison to what is happening literally at this moment as we speak in Israeli prisons. So the fact that, we're seeing these Syrian or whatever, I say CI run, it's not Syrian, it's CI run. It sounds the same, but it's the opposite. These mercenaries welcoming Israel, saying, "Oh, we want Israel to come in and invest." And Israel's now swallowing up more land. It's expanding its so-called buffer zone of its occupation of the Syrian Golan Heights. It's now just bombed the entire Syrian naval fleet. It's bombing Damascus. It's basically wiping out any remnants of any military force in Syria. So there's no way that anybody can resist, even if some force were to come together that wants to resist, that wants to try to stop the genocide or slow it down. So it's in a perfect world, sure, Assad's very bad, but we live in reality, and
I didn't vote for him.
Yeah, exactly. It's sad time. So, basically, that's how I see it. It's just watching these like FSA and HTS guys welcoming Israel in. There's a video that just came out about 2 hours ago from Yunus Turawi, who showed Israeli soldiers on patrol in a non-armored vehicle in Quneitra in southern Syria. They don't even need any bit of armor on their vehicle because they know that there is literally zero threat to them from these mercenaries, because they've been paying them and arming them and treating them and have all kinds of not very secret contacts with these mercenaries over the last decade plus. So that's why they feel totally comfortable just going in, like they just go in like a Honda Civic and feel great going around southern Syria. That's the situation. So I think what we're seeing now is kind of a scramble for Syria between Turkey, Israel, and Qatar that are all going to try to carve out their sphere of influence. And these are the vultures. These are the snakes, the kind of subcontractors of Western imperialism that are just going to eat Syria alive. And I feel just terrible for the people of Syria.
Yeah, it's awful, man. Like, this is hard to talk about. Like, this, the anti-imperialist Twitter was in shambles for good reason over the last few days. I am anti-imperialist at my core. It's the foundation of my ideology. It's the foundation of communism, being anti-imperialist. So being anti-imperialist at my core, especially as someone who lived in the most violent empire in modern human history, I try to keep my criticisms of other leaders mute because we live in the most violent and the most corrupt country in the world. And you do nothing but enable the empire and their propaganda by trying to pretend these leaders are inherently different or worse than the Western leaders that we are currently governed under. So look at this crazy story. And in my mind, it's so decolonized. My mind's so decolonized. This is why I will never, ever side. This is why I don't understand why pro-Palestinian people getting this confused. I inherently will never cheer for anyone who takes assistance from the CIA. Anyone who betray their people and take foreign help. I explained this before on a rant stream before, how the South Korean traitors was on the cups of losing, and many South Koreans were tortured in prison. Many anti-communists in South Korea was tortured and imprisoned because even though they disagreed with the communists, they didn't agree with the South Korean traitors teaming with the United States on what was a domestic issue. So no matter where I stand on the side, my opinion on the side is irrelevant. You guys understand, as an anti-imperialist principle, if you are a resistance group or a movement that rely on the CIA, I am automatically against you. I am automatically against you. And that should not be controversial. And regarding Assad, the fact that you had him fighting this, once again, I'm not a supporter of Assad. I didn't vote for the motherfucker. Don't care about him at all. I am just a geopolitical analyst, and this is how I analyze the situation after studying this for years. You have these people who sided with the CIA, was armed with the CIA, and then had an uprising against the government where they murdered and tortured civilians. What the fuck would happen to people in the West if they did the same thing? Before you guys say Assad is a tyrant, do you understand how quickly America will become tyrannical and fuck? If we took Russian money, Russian weapons, imagine we openly took Chinese weapons, Chinese money, and we're going to overthrow our government so we get friendly relationships with China. Do you understand what our government would do to us? And you guys talking about Assad as a dictator? Once again, not Assad, don't give a fuck about him. But how is this not common sense? Now this is, and I want you to comment on this to direct the question to you. I want you to speak on the United States sanctions and interference in Syria. Another reason why I do not fucking blame Assad, because you guys understand the United States was stealing 80% of Syria's oil output. They were stealing wheat and food. Anyway, I'll pass you down. I'm really ranting today. It's been a very frustrating weekend to live through. So, Dan, feel free to take it anywhere you want. When you speak on the United States influence on Syria, you guys will understand why I will never support anyone who joined these motherfuckers. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I feel your rage. I mean, it's been it's infuriating. I mean, I've been just kind of like vacillating between outraged, heartbroken, and and I don't even know what, with what's gone on here. Seeing just how, I mean, especially, I got into journalism in 2014. I started following Syria closely in 2016, I guess a little bit after the Russian intervention. And I was following it. I was a correspondent at RT America in 2017, and when Aleppo was liberated, for example, from all these, like, this patchwork of jihadist militias funded by Saudi Arabia and all these groups, and I would watch every day these battles back and forth where the Syrian army and its allies Hezbollah and Russia would liberate these neighborhoods one by one, painstakingly, street by street. And to see all of that sacrifice from Syria's people, from its young men who gave their lives to free their country from these lunatics, and now just in like a week, it's just all basically for naught. It's all just gone. All of that is just like, man, that just like hurts deep
Yeah,
inside.
man.
So no, it's painful, and just to see the amount of confusion and propagandized minds on social media from people who I've otherwise respected, still at this point, who believe there was some kind of real revolution in Syria, and this is a total CIA counter revolution. I mean, it's just literally, they're thinking up is down. They're just completely bass backwards. And to see they're still falling for this stuff is just crazy. And I think really it has to be said, this is the influence of basically one media outlet, Al Jazeera.
I'm glad you said it because I was about to go ahead. I wish you expound on that because the same thing that happened in right now is what happened after the Bernie campaign. During the Bernie campaign, there was this wide movement of people who wanted Medicare for all, but we thought there was way more people on their side than there actually was because of Bernie. The same thing that is happening with the anti-imperialist movement post October 7th, where we thought a lot of motherfuckers was on our side because they took the obvious position of opposing genocide. But then these are the same people who supported NATO in Ukraine. These are the same people who spread Assadist lies like Mehdi Assad and Al Jazeera. But Dan, I would love you to finish your thought.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. These are the snakes, the infiltrators. The Mehdi Hassans are just totally the worst people. And so, who Mehdi Hassan worked for Al Jazeera for years at the same time that he worked at The Intercept, and then he used that to launch his career into MSNBC. And I mean, I got nothing personal against Mehdi Hassan, but he was, I remember at The Intercept, he was promoting this, Assad is so bad, Assadists are I don't remember what the stupid article was, but he blocked me in like 2017 for gently criticizing him. But this is the Al Jazeera effect. And Al Jazeera, as much as it's done incredible journalism on Palestine, that's how they reel you in, where they, do this great journalism on Palestine, and then they give you a poison pill of all this propaganda on Syria, and especially Al Jazeera Arabic, I gotta say, where there's all kinds of sectarian propaganda. There were even earlier on in the Syrian war, or the dirty war on Syria, there were calls. You'd have hosts calling for people to go do jihad in Syria, which is just insane. And Qatar, which owns the Qatari monarchy, which is the complete opposite of democratic. I don't see anyone calling, is that the Al Thani family? Is that are they, Thanists? Nobody ever made up that smear like they did for us to call us Assadists just because we oppose war on Syria. But this regime was pumping huge amounts of money and weapons into these Takfiri groups that are waging a dirty war on Syria, and at the same time poisoning the minds of people throughout the Middle East to basically want this to happen. So, Al Jazeera is just a toxic outlet, and that has to be said. So I think that's a huge reason for what's just happened. And you think about, Qatar is a very small country, but the power of that media organ is incredible. Imagine if, Syria has Sana, the state media outlet that puts out a couple headlines per day. It just does not, it's not equal at all. There's no kind of parity here. So the damage that Al Jazeera Arabic has done especially to young people, is just incredible.
Yeah, I was looking at Al Jazeera today. I'm gonna look on it again and see how accurate this is, because I remember that I was looking at their website last night, and they had all these fall of Assad. I'm fact checking myself now here because I want to see if they changed it. But I remember, let me look here. Yeah, what do you guys see missing here on this headline? Look, they have a whole segment. Look, they have a whole goddamn tab, fall of Assad. Do you guys see any
Amazing.
stories on the front page about Israel invading Syria as a result of Assad falling? So these people pretend to care about limiting Zionist influence, and they are muted. You can find articles. It's buried. It's muted about how the foreign policy that they wanted to see accomplished directly led to Israel invading Syria. But anyway, that's a side point, and this is not an echo chamber. It only seems that way because people are afraid to spar with me for some reason, even though I'm very nice. Like I'm down to talk to people I disagree with. I have done it all the time. So if you are someone who's a rabidly anti-Assad, you have a safe space on RBN. I promise you, I won't bite your head off. You might teach me a thing or two, and that's an open call for anyone who thinks I'm wrong, because I have studied this issue for years now. At this point, and I would love to see what I'm missing on this. So if you're extremely anti-Assad, you have an open chance to have a conversation with me. Maybe you can teach me something. One thing I also seen criticisms of the resistance at Assad. I would love to hear talk to people about that. But Syria was weakened and never had a chance in hindsight, because the United States empire had its plan. Obviously, they wanted to be successful in 2011 and earlier on this decade. But their plan was to cripple Syria with sanctions to the point where they couldn't even pay their soldiers. So people are like, how did Assad let this happen? Because they couldn't pay their soldiers. We have a government that has been crippled, who have been a victim of United States and Western theft. And then people who are extremely anti-Assad, like, man, Assad is a horrible leader. He mismanaged resources. The fuck? The United States is stealing wheat. They're stealing 80% of the oil of the same people that say Maduro mismanages resources when he's the victim of crippling sanctions. It's an analysis without ever considering the impact of U.S. imperialism. But once again, I am humble. I may be wrong. If anyone disagrees with me and you've been studying this issue, I'm more than happy to have you on. So last thoughts on Syria and Dan, and then we can move on. We can quickly talk about Israel and Gaza. Anything else you want to add to this topic, Dan?
I had some kind of thought formulated, but I got lost in what you were saying, so I forgot what it is. But it's just, I don't know where things are going to go from here. That's, I think, there are a couple big questions in my mind. What exactly happened? I mean, what you just said, what we've been talking about, the incredible pressure put on Syria that obviously led to its collapse. But what is the actual sort of chain of events that why was there not so much? Why was there basically almost very little resistance after the initial battles? Were there stand down orders? Did the U.S. or Turkey or Qatar or whoever infiltrate, compel generals to give stand down orders? I mean, there are so many possibilities here. And, now that Assad is safely in Moscow, I hope he'll speak. I hope we'll get an idea of what exactly happened. But, what does this mean for, I guess the axis of resistance is broken in the sense that there is no longer contiguous, land bridge between Iran all the way to Hezbollah. So what does this mean going forward for the sort of, various resistance forces in the region? I don't know. I mean, it's, nothing's written in stone. So many things can happen. But, we just got to be focused on the future and finding ways and not take our attention off of this Gaza genocide. I mean, every day Israel's still killing 40, 50, 100 people. It's inconceivable. This is for something like 450 days now. I mean, it's just, yeah. I still can't even comprehend the scale of destruction, starvation, of mass murder that Israel's carrying out. And, it's basically been, I think actually one of the, it's so normalized at this point that it's like for people to actually celebrate the downfall of Syria, they have to have totally normalized the genocide.
There was just another massacre last night. There was just another massacre last night. Gaza is a sitting duck now. They're screwed. Like, there's no deterrence now. There's the Israel. They ramped up I gotta be careful how I phrase that, because they always been murdering them. So I gotta be careful how I phrase it. But they definitely are way more emboldened now because of that. But Dan, anything else you want to add Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. I mean, the thing is, the resistance still goes on in Gaza. That's what's so incredible to me is despite everything, despite these horrors, the resistance is still going on. And, just today, Al-Qassam took out a convoy of Israeli soldiers, took out like 3 Israeli soldiers in northern Gaza. And actually, Hezbollah took out, I think, 4 soldiers in southern Lebanon, which even despite this ceasefire, Israel keeps carrying out operations in southern Lebanon. And they just lost soldiers. And we're supposed to pretend that there's some kind of ceasefire going on. So this isn't the end. I mean, I don't want people to fall into despair because Assad is out and Syria collapsed. It's not the end of resistance. It's going to take on a new form. Resistance is going to continue in Gaza. Resistance is obviously going to continue in Lebanon. And, it's not as if everything just disappeared, but, there's a lot to be seen of how we go forward. So, all your listeners, don't give in to despair. Stay focused, stay revolutionary optimism. That's the thing.
Yeah, great message. I'm gonna pivot now. This stream was way more rantier than I planned, but you guys know I never actually planned to rant, but I cover these stories and I get angry while covering them, and then my plan always go out the window. So I appreciate you joining and riffing with me, Dan. I'm gonna go through some receipts, get back organized as we wrap up like the last 25 minutes. We just do a 1 hour Syria power hour today. So let me get back to some of the receipts. And I showed this before because I don't want people to get twisted. And I already see people getting it twisted here. You guys understand what the West is doing, right? They're playing fucking multiple 4D chess. So now they're like, oh, we just on principle. We all about staying out of conflicts because the side you guys backed won. And now they are saying this to give the illusion that they have nothing to do with this. Because Trump, I see a few people comment like, yeah, good for Trump. No. Trump is the guy who escalated the sanctions regime against Syria. He's the one, he was debating with his cabinet, and I had to say somewhere, I had to find him outline. There was the debate in their cabinet between Trump and the CIA about whether they should topple Assad right now or whether they should just continue the slow burn. Trump apparently was against topping him now, but he was still for the sanction regime that will eventually weaken Assad, which will lead to the fall of his regime. So you can't take this anti-imperialist, hands-off approach after everything you have done and continue to do in Syria. You guys are openly supporting Israel launching attacks in Syria, and the United States is still calling for presence to maintain in Syria at the same time. So I just want to point out that this is actually kind of a head fake. I had this in my notes. I just wanted to point this out to people because I saw a lot of people giving Trump props for this. But this is actually the same position that Emmanuel Macron has taken. They're the same position as Keir Starmer. The strategic position of the West who interfered in Syria is to now say, after they got the result they cared about, is, oh, guys, we need to take a principled stand about interventions. Fuck out of here. Dan, anything you want to add before I move on?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually pretty important to sort of parse out, Trump's statement here. I mean, at least on its face, yeah, I agree with the sort of hands-on, just this is not our fight sort of thing. That's the very best we're going to get out of the U.S. But yes, I mean, definitely Trump played a big role in what's going on in Syria. He assassinated Soleimani, for example, General Soleimani, who was the top who led the fight against ISIS. And there were even, CNN reports and big U.S. generals admitting that, a decade ago. So Trump, so like basically when, Trump likes to say that he defeated ISIS in, a couple weeks, and ISIS was being defeated by the local resistance forces. And then when it was like this ship was already sinking, then, Trump, comes in and okay. The other thing that I think is really important to look at is what Lindsey Graham has been saying. And Lindsey, Trump was campaigning with Lindsey Graham, one of the worst neocons in the U.S.
I haven't seen what he said. I'm actually curious. I'm gonna see if I can find it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got this tweet pulled up. You can look at his timeline. It's from yesterday. where he says, with the recent collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, the game changes dramatically. It's a big loss for Russia and Iran, which is good. Okay, so of course he's happy because it benefits Israel. However, he says, however, the jihadist forces that have replaced Assad create major problems for Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Blah, blah, blah. President Trump destroyed the caliphate. A breakout and reestablishment of ISIS is a major threat to the U.S. and our friends. And so the point I made, and he has another tweet about, oh, this is a huge national security threat. The point that I made, I tweeted it last night, but now with the U.S. and Israel and all these countries supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria and basically having a collapsed state, now the U.S. has a renewed pretext to maintain its presence in Syria and in Iraq, supposedly to fight ISIS, but of course to just keep the region weak and divided, and also to steal oil. So, and to prevent anything. So, there's no talk about sanctions being lifted or, oh, well, Assad is out. And so Iranian influence was out, which was ostensibly the other pretext. But, none of this is going to be lifted. So now we're going to see basically the deep state trying to keep Trump from, I don't know, if you agree with me on this. I do think that Trump has anti-interventionist instincts, but he just surrounds himself, because you cannot get to the top without surrounding yourself with neocons and war.
I think Donald Trump doesn't have he doesn't have a coherent ideology, which tends to benefit like anti-interventionism, because and just to add to your point, I think like John Bolton, he has an ideology, like he has a hardcore neocon Henry Kissinger ideology. I think Trump doesn't have an ideology, which leads to him doing some anti-war, anti-intervention stuff sometimes, but it also leads him to being easily tricked by the general. So that's my general take on it.
Yeah, exactly. Even just looking at Trump, he's just a walking contradiction, where it's like he's like his whole who he is. He's like a New York City real estate mogul, kind of sleazebag, wearing this like "Make America Great Again" hat that like resonates with like kind of middle America, working class. But so it's like that's a complete contradiction, and that's what Trump is, where he's like says he's against intervention, let's stay out of here and make America great again, but I just took $100 million from Miriam Adelson and we're gonna make Israel great again. It's just like what is this? So he's totally contradictory, and he's relying, he gets tricked really easy. It was actually General Milley who came to Trump and said, you got to take out Soleimani. That was reported. So it wasn't even his idea. He was just like, oh, it's a great idea. And he'll never admit that he was wrong. But then Tucker Carlson convinced him to, after Iran struck the Al-Assad airbase, U.S. airbase in Iraq, Tucker Carlson convinced him to not, attack Iran. So it's just like the guy's a walking contradiction. But, allying with, I think basically what we're seeing is the deep state, through the ghost ship of the Biden administration, is trying to escalate every geopolitical conflict possible, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, where they're basically have given the Ukrainians the go-ahead to launch long-range strikes into Russia, and then also now with this collapse of the Assad government in Syria. So basically to light everything on fire, so when Trump comes in, he's gotta just like he's dealing with all of these things. So that that's what I think is going on in the bigger picture and here in Washington. So but I think that we're gonna see this is the pretext now. It's like a 2-for-1. They got rid of Assad. They broke the axis of resistance in terms of its contiguous land, and now they have a pretext for a new war on terror. It's ISIS is back. We're gonna make him. We got to go take him out again. So
man, this is such a win for the empire on so many levels. I actually didn't even consider that. This is good because now they have Oh, look, the terrorists took over Syria. Now we gotta stay there. Oh, look, we gotta take the wheat. We can't let the terrorists get the wheat. So yeah, there's so many levels to this, which is infuriating and bad to see. I'm gonna do just a few acknowledgments and we move on. We have just another 15 minutes or so. We keep this to around an hour. We're gonna talk about the quote unquote Syrian revolution that many people cheered on, and how Israel is also extremely on board with it. So just a few more receipts, and you can feel free to chime in if you have any comments while I do that. I'm gonna read a few super chats. Thank you for $5, Chima. People make bullshit claim that Assad killed 500,000 Syrians by himself. Once again, guys, I looked into every single claim made against Assad, and it's all these Western sources. It's all this Western bullshit. They never collaborate. And someone mentioned Aaron Mate on this. And Aaron Mate deserves probably the OCPW gas attack scale. Like that was like a big eye opener. Like, because I was someone who already didn't trust the West as it was, and so I was learning about Assad and Syria. As soon as I catch you in one lie like that, your credibility is gone. So after I learned about that lie, how they lied about him gassing his own people, I asked myself the question, why would they lie about him? What else are they lying about him? And that will lead to the position I have now. Last super chat, and then we move on. Thanks for the $10. When NATO toppled Gaddafi, yeah, I have a clip. Hopefully we had time to get to it, where the same coverage you're seeing right now, where the corporate media try and manufacture consent about Syrians celebrating in the streets. They do this every time where there's a CIA-backed color revolution or someone who rebel on. Oh, look, the people are celebrating. There's literally segments that are exactly the same. They said the same thing with Libya. People celebrating in the streets in Libya. They're doing the same thing again. So this is a great comment. When NATO toppled Gaddafi, they brought slavery back to Africa and said it was their biggest mistake ever. And now they toppled Assad to give Syria to ISIS, and people celebrate. They learned nothing. Once again, Syria is not as easy as an issue to get as Palestine is, but the information is readily available. It's very easy. It's possible to navigate. It's not as easy as Palestine, but it's perplexing to see people with strong opinions get this wrong. I think you wanted to chime in, Dan. Feel free if you had any comments.
It's spurred a thought that I forgot to mention. I mean, you do see these like big crowds going to celebrate that Assad is gone, and I'm sure there's many Syrians, I have no idea what percentage, I'm not saying a majority, I don't know, who are celebrating. Okay. Same thing happened when Saddam fell. Iraqis were pretty excited. Or at least some Iraqis were pretty excited. Yep. Because he had like a police state. Same thing, there were some people that were excited when Gaddafi fell. Even when the U.S. Invaded Haiti, there were people that were there were Haitians that were happy about that. But then you know what happened? They realized, oh, wait a minute, this is bad, and they ended up rising up and kicking them out. And look at Iraq now. There's all kinds of it's I'm not going to say dominated, but there are huge militias that are, the entire parliament is against the United States. Libya, is still still in chaos because of the NATO invasion of Libya. But I think what's going to happen is, basically the empire's strategy is to create so much pressure through sanctions, through dirty war. And as a result of that pressure, the existing government becomes more authoritarian. It has to survive. Yeah. That's just the nature of it. And so then when it collapses, people are, oh, they're so happy. But then there's no lifting of sanctions. The situation doesn't actually improve. And then it's like, oh man, we just went from, the frying pan into the fire, so yeah. So I think that's what we're going to see is this momentary elation is going to be fleeting.
The same people that say, well, Zelensky, it's okay that he doesn't hold an election. He's in war. The same people that say that, they say, oh, right. Assad is a brutal authoritarian. He's been in civil war for, 15 years? I forgot how long.
Yeah.
Like, 10. So a government that is under civil war will always inherently be more authoritarian than a government that is not. Like, I thought people understood this, but they're children, I guess. You know what I mean? And if you're in the war, your government will inherently be more authoritarian, whether you like it or not. And funny how people give Zelensky a pass, but they hold Assad. And the only difference I have, and I understand why people may think I sound pro Assad. The only thing I'm doing is I'm holding Assad to the same standard that I hold our government leaders. Like, of course, he would do the same shit any leader that would do in this situation. That's my analysis. But anything else you want to add? And then we go through a few more receipts and then we wrap up soon.
Yeah, one more thing about, Assad's authoritarianism, which, I don't even know exactly what that means. That's not like a real thing, authoritarianism.
That's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other conversation.
But when they basically, when Syria and Hezbollah and Russia, I don't want to say won, because obviously they didn't win, but when they basically liberated these neighborhoods in Aleppo and different neighborhoods in just throughout Syria, they didn't take these foreign insurgents, these Al-Qaeda fighters that had come from Libya and Tunisia and all over the world, Uyghurs and all this stuff. They didn't take them and put them against the wall and kill them or throw them, or some of them they imprisoned, rightfully so, but what they mostly did was stick them on green buses. I don't know if you remember that, Nick, but they put them on green buses and sent them to Idlib province, where they basically lived with the support of Turkey, and organized this whole invasion, this whole coup. So if you were some real, dictatorial guy who's just wants to kill people, he would have taken those guys and lined them up against the wall, and that would have been it. And I'm going to be careful what I say here, but it might have been a mistake to be so nice with those guys, considering what they had just done and their colors, their stripes were not changing. So basically they were sent to Idlib, where they just had free reign to get NATO weapons from Turkey, way more advanced weaponry than Syria had. Syria is fighting with, old Soviet weapons from like the 1970s, whereas, these NATO mercenaries are coming in with like drones and all kinds of fancy weaponry. So, they didn't stand a chance. So sending these guys on green buses to Idlib province, we made kind of a meme about it, about green buses at the time, but it was just like, that was not some display. That was totally out of character for Assad if he was some, horrible, brutal, authoritarian dictator.
Exactly. You want to know who else was too nice? Nicolas Maduro. Someone else the West called a tyrant and authoritarian. His opposition party was caught coordinating with the CIA, took arms from them, and tried to assassinate them. And this motherfucker allowed them to run in the next election. The fuck? And then the West, so when you have people that took the CIA weapons and they try to overthrow Nicolas Maduro put some of them in prison because they tried to fucking overthrow the government. And then Bernie Sanders said this is an example of why Nicolas Maduro is a tyrant, because there was penalties for you trying to overthrow the government. Like, do people in the West understand how stupid they sound to people whose minds are completely decolonized? That's all the anti-Nicolas Maduro shit sound like to me. That's all the anti-Assad shit sound like to me. It's like this complete fancy land of a government that they don't even expect to live under themselves. Once again, if you question my position, especially as an American, put yourself in their position. Imagine you actually pulled off what fucking Juan Guaido and them tried to do, an armed uprising where they tried to kill Nicolas Maduro. And people think that our government will have a laissez-faire libertarian stance on that. They locked up people for January 6th, guys. Anyway, sorry, let me end the rants. Let me get to some more receipts.
You're right, dude.
Yeah,
100%.
Let's see how many receipts we can get through. Feel free to chime in, Dan. I just want to be respectful of your time. That's all. So feel free to chime in. I'm going to see how much receipts I can get through. Anything else you want to add to what I just said before I move on?
No. I have 15 minutes and I got to run. But
all right, cool. Let's quickly. We wrap up in 5. Let's quickly go through a few headlines for the quote unquote people who cheering on the Syrian revolution. The corporate and Western media had been insufferable. I didn't have time to show you guys all the headlines that made my eye roll, but I'll show you guys one that sad brought to my attention. Syrians also have Israel to thank for their liberation. Guys, this is the shit that this is why I'm so ranty today. I've been reading this shit all weekend. But for a second time, I'm going to go here a little bit faster. This is another reason why if you're a Syrian, makes no sense for you to celebrate. That's essentially what this segment is in a nutshell. In the last 24 hours, Israel and the United States have neutralized Syria's entire air defenses, military research facilities, Syrian air bases, fire jets, and ammunition storages. And then you also have Israel that's grabbing land in the Syrian Golan Heights, threatening the villagers there. This is a great revolution, isn't it? Don't you guys feel the power of this Syrian revolution that enabled the United States and the West? This is what people like Mehdi Hassan and them are cheering on. I got skipped this video for the sake of time, but this is people in Israel that openly describe the Greater Israel program. I'm quickly going through the receipts. I'm cutting this off for the sake of time. But they very open about the fact they see Syria as part of the Greater Israel strategy. I quickly read this. China is calling out Israel for invading Syria. I also have all these links. I want to make sure I show you guys this one. I have all these receipts over the people who actually took over over Syria. I may change it. I may save most of these receipts for Vanessa Beasley, who will be joining me, or Beasley, sorry, who will be joining me on Wednesday. But this is the same, and we will end it on this video because there's going to be so much to cover. I have Vanessa Beasley on. I will have one of the lead hosts from Syria Analysis on Friday. So this is going to be a topic that we're going to hit hard this entire week. So let's play this video, and then I want you to take from here, because this is a corporate media story that is essentially the same segment we are seeing aired all over Western media right now to substitute Libya with Syria. This is, I think it was 2011. Yeah, big shout out to the squirrel lady. Scenes from Libya in 2011. And let's watch the segment where the West was talking about it, and then I want you to respond.
NTC forces insert. After many weeks of fighting, the former rebels celebrate their victory. But after a constant bombardment by land and air, the city lays in ruins. This ordinary drainage pipe has now taken on a greater significance as people come from miles around to see the final resting place of Colonel Gaddafi. Meanwhile, people in Tripoli are also happy to see the back of the dictator. If we caught him alive and hanged him like Saddam Hussein, we would have had another just like him. But since we killed him, just like a corpse, this is a glorious day. With people celebrating and singing in the streets of Tripoli, people are happy in the knowledge that after 42 years, they're finally free from tyranny. The Libyan people are hoping for a quick recovery and see a bright future ahead of them.
Quick recovery and bright future. Guys, I promise you, I've been watching way too many of these segments. You will see this exact same segment. Go ahead. Go see it in YouTube, MSNBC. This same exact segment, verbatim, about Syria. Here's Trump warning about the people who just took over Syria. This is 2013. Remember, all these freedom fighters in Syria want to fly planes into our buildings. Now, these are the people you got cheering, taking on. And despite all this, this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll pass to you, Dan. This is why I put in the title, the terrorists have officially won the war on terror, because now they're being officially recognized by the West. So sorry for a very rainy stream. I'll be back on Wednesday. There's going to be a lot of cover on this. It was great to have Dan on today. One of the best guests I could have for this Syria-based episode. So I'll give you last thoughts. Feel free to share any last thoughts you have on this topic, anything you want to shout out, and then we can wrap up. I appreciate your time. Great conversation as always, Dan.
Definitely. I mean, that Libya clip just really says everything. You just basically bombard people. First, you choke off their country, their economy. You make them suffer. So they're desperate for any kind of change, and they aren't necessarily politicized. And, you wave basically something shiny when you get people desperate, and then you bombard them with propaganda that their leader is some kind of horrible dictator or whatever, and then you do the regime change, and they welcome the poison of the empire destroying their sovereignty. And we see we're like in now year 14 of the NATO intervention, the NATO collapse of Libya, and there's no end in sight. So it's just amazing how propaganda can get people to turn against their own interests completely. And yeah, I think you're right. This is what we're going to see. I think we're likely to see this kind of thing in Syria. I mean, I don't want to be cynical about Syria, but I'm also not naive. Like, Syria lost its sovereignty. Israel, Turkey, Qatar, they're basically ruling Syria through their proxies. And if Syria is going to, become kind of Syria again, it's going to go through some really difficult, painful processes where the Syrian national concept has not died, but it's been taken out of political power. It has no military or political power now. So I hope it can reconstitute itself, but I think that's going to it could even take generations. But I hope it's sooner than later. So yeah. So thanks a lot, Nick. I appreciate you having me on 100%.
Yeah. Always great talking to you. I always tell people, if they at the beginning stages of learning about the Palestine struggle, that your film Killing Gaza is always a great resource to understand what really is going on in Gaza. And make sure you can follow his news on I think it's Uncatcher Media is where you're at now. So make sure you guys follow Dan. I'll be back Wednesday with Vanessa Beeley. Hope you guys enjoyed Syria Power Hour today. The thing is, we could have went longer easily, but there's so much to discuss. I'll be back on Wednesday with Vanessa, and we will cover this more. And you also can find great analysis on Dan's page. Thank you guys for watching the show. Make sure you guys like and subscribe if you guys enjoy these live streams. I appreciate you guys. Have a good day. Peace out.